So, welcome back to Des Moines Small Business and Startup Stories podcast. I'm your host, Diana Wright, and today we are in for a treat. We have Megan Luchtel, and she is the founder and also the owner of Lake Label. So, we'll talk a little bit more of what Lake Label is just in a second. But Megan, welcome to the podcast here and the show.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Okay, so I'm going to get into it. I always like to ask our guests, when you were young, thinking back, what did you actually want to be when you were growing up? Did you ever have any influence of entrepreneurship early on?
That's such a good question. I never thought that I would own my own business or be an entrepreneur, which is funny because my father is an attorney, but he went out on his own really young in his early 30s and started a firm by himself with another partner, but just the two of them. But when I was growing up, I really had no idea what that meant. I didn't understand the struggles that he was going through as a business owner, or really like how amazing it was that he did that and took that leap at such a young age. So for me growing up, I just assumed that I would either fall into corporate America or do something kind of for somebody else. I don't know why, but entrepreneurialism was definitely not on my radar for myself, at least.
Mm-hmm. So can you kind of share, like, what did you aspire to be when you were growing up? Like, say you were age 7, what were you thinking back then?
Okay, so even already at age 7, I loved clothes and fashion and design. And as I grew up, design was always a hobby of mine. So looking back from where I am now, my story makes a lot of sense. But of course, as you're going through it, you don't always connect those dots. So even by high school, I was designing and sewing my own clothes or handbags. Anything I could really do creatively, I loved. But I remember when I was selecting my major, so probably 16, 17, 18 years old, trying to decide where I was going to go to school and what I wanted to major in, I actually remember telling my parents, I love design and I love fashion, but I feel like that's not serious enough or impactful enough to study. And so I chose business, and I went into business, and I got right into corporate America after I graduated. And looking back, like, this seed has always been inside of me for design and for wanting to create something with my hands, and take an idea from my head to reality. But it wasn't until, my mid 30s that I actually realized that dream and took a chance on myself.
Okay. So then was there ever, thinking like when you were in corporate America, was there ever an influential moment or maybe a person that got you to kind of think, okay, no, you can try out this design thing more than just a hobby?
Yes, for sure. I feel like there have been so many influential people in my life. I've just been really gifted and blessed with so many people who have taken an interest and mentors that have helped me along the way. But really, on the creative side, I feel like both my grandmothers were huge influences in my life, in my adolescence. And as I grew up, they're the ones who taught me how to sew. So in high school, when I wanted to make a skirt for my senior pictures myself, they taught me how to thread the machine and kind of showed me just the basics of sewing. So I'm not a formally trained seamstress at all, but my grandmothers took the time to show me that. And then actually my father's mother, she studied fashion design in college. And this is over 50 years ago. And she is an artist. And so I remember as a child looking at her sketches and her pastel drawings and almost feeling like I could never do that, but I admired it. And I thought it was so cool. And so fast forward to young adulthood, I married a man who is an entrepreneur. And so that actually, being married to someone and seeing 24/7 what it was like to own your own business, gave me a ton of appreciation for what my father did while I was growing up and what he did to support our family with 4 kids and my mother, in owning his own business, and realizing there was so much that went into it that I didn't even know as a child. But then really my husband always encouraging me. And as I was getting ready to leave corporate America, just saying, you can own your own business. Like, you can do this. So many people, take the jump, and it's a lot of work, but you can learn it if you're willing to put the time in. So it was really his influence in the end. Although, like I said, there were so many people pouring into me and influencing me over the years to get me to that point.
That's pretty special to have it from both sides of a family, but then even like a close family member, your husband, who is living it every day, as well as your dad, your father. I guess, like, can you talk about, like, so when did you make that decision? What year? What was the date? Do you recall the day of like leaving your job and then being like, okay, now what?
Yes, I do. So leaving corporate America actually corresponded more with some personal family development. So I had my first child 8 years ago, yesterday, actually. My oldest just turned 8 yesterday. And we were living in Arizona, and I had been working in corporate America since I graduated college, just really putting in the time, traveling when I needed to, working really hard, and slowly working my way up. And I had reached a director level at the company that I was in, and I really loved my position. I was doing directing all of the sales training. So it wasn't that I didn't love my job, but for personal reasons, my husband and I decided to move our family from Scottsdale, Arizona, back to Des Moines to be closer to. We wanted our kids to grow up a little closer to their grandparents and be around our family. And when I first decided to move, I communicated with my company and said I was willing to try to work remotely and then negotiate my travel down a little bit. And within the first month of being back in Iowa, both parties, myself and the company, realized that just wasn't going to work. It was going to be too much travel. I didn't want to put that in when I had a young family. And they needed someone who could really give, 40 plus, 50 plus hours a week. And so I sort of fell into being a stay-at-home mom for a few years. At that time, I had the opportunity to decide, do I want to pursue another path? We had just moved to Des Moines. Do I want to look for another position? Or I had always had a slight interest in being home with my son, my only child, a baby at the time, but I never really had the guts, I felt like, to quit the job I had in Arizona because I loved it too much. It was so fast paced and really fun and fulfilling for me. So really the move pushed me to make that decision of realizing, okay, this remote agreement isn't going to work. And why don't I just take a few months and see what it's like to be a full-time mom at home, as my only gig for a while. And I did that for about 6 years. Mm-hmm. And in that time, we had 2 other children, but I always felt, I don't know if it was a void, but I always missed the creativity and the way I got to express myself in the career place, whether that was giving a presentation or even the experiences of traveling to a new city and meeting new groups of people, just the stimulation that came with a career. And so my husband and I had been talking for probably the last 4 years pretty seriously about what is this next chapter going to look like for me. And I had, I guess, the luxury of really taking time to figure out what I wanted to do. And I didn't feel rushed into anything, which was a huge gift. But I knew that I didn't want to go back to reporting to an office every day at a certain time and taking trips when I was told I had to take trips. I wanted something that would allow me to protect the time I had with my family, but also that would give me the liberty to be creative and to pursue something that I was really passionate about that was maybe like a project for myself. And also, it was important to me to show my kids that they can do whatever they want to. So when they get to the age, if there's something they want to pursue, I wanted them to know that they were empowered to do that. And that they were capable. So that's a really long, drawn out answer. But the reality was it was a really long, drawn out process to get to this point where I was finally ready to say, I'm going to start my own thing. And that really started last February. So February of 2021.
Okay. Awesome. So last February, I guess, like, and this is kind of interesting, like what was happening around the world. Us, obviously, everyone kind of had this great reevaluation of their lives taking place during 2020 through the pandemic still. And there was actually a lot of people going out and starting businesses. So you kind of fall into this interesting group of entrepreneurs actually who maybe it wasn't by your design. It doesn't sound like it because you did have that gift of time over the last couple of years to really think about your next move. But can you talk about like starting a business? I don't know if how everything affected you as it related to being remote. It sounds like you might have already been adjusted to that. But yeah, talk about the early days of starting your business and Lake Label itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So this product that I needed, which is a full body sun protective swimsuit for kids, was really something that I had just been shopping for the past 2 years. It was a product that I needed for my own kids. We spend most of our summer up north at Lake Okoboji. And when we had our first child, it was really easy to come in from the boat when the sun started to get too hot, or if I felt like he'd been in the heat too much, we would just come in and he'd take a little nap break and we could head back out when the sun set. But as we had more kids, we now have 3. Our youngest, I found him being drug around with us all day with no reprieve from the sun or no breaks because my big kids wanted to stay on the boat all day or they wanted to be on the dock. And so the baby was just kind of a tag along baby. He had to stick with us no matter what. There was no option. And I never felt satisfied with the sun protection that I found in traditional children's swimwear. In fact, his first summer at the lake, I ended up putting him in his cotton pajamas, the cotton pajama onesies most days, because although they weren't, moisture wicking and they weren't made for being wet or swimwear, at least they protected his skin from the sun. And that's really what I needed. So he would be in his pajamas on the boat all day and I would flash him to keep him cool, but at least I wasn't worried about his skin. And especially those first 6 months, babies are too little for sunblock. So you don't have really a strong line of defense against the sun other than just staying indoors or staying out of the sun, which for a lot of active young families is just not always a reality. So again, this product, I just shopped for it for 2 years. I thought surely someone is making this in print that a modern mother would love and want to put her babies in. And I just could not find it. So by the time my son turned 1, I think the first person I talked with was my husband, and he knew that I'd been shopping for this product. And I sort of very nervously brought up the idea of maybe I should start sketching this. And I can't be the only mom who needs this type of swimsuit. And of course, as we started thinking and talking about this project, some of these pieces started to fall into place where we realized, we've really been wondering what my next chapter would look like. And this seems to really fit a lot of my interests and my passions, which is, safe products for kids and creating something that really allows families to spend more time together outside in nature, which is something that our family is really passionate about. When we feel most connected to each other is when our devices are at home and we're out on the lake, just the 5 of us. So it was around February of last year when I just started drawing and taking this idea from my head and putting it into a sketchbook. And I mean, I saved all my drawings. I still have 20 different renditions of the sketching that I did. And every time I would do another draft, it would just get a little better until I finally felt like I had an illustration that I could bring to somebody to really show them this is what I want to create, to communicate the idea clearly.
So kind of rewinding a little bit, how big of a problem do you think this is? Like when maybe like after your first sketches, did you first talk to other moms? Did you actually like Google or do any like market research? Like, okay, first off, how many moms are there out there that have kids between, this age? It sounds like infant to even toddler and maybe beyond. But how big of a problem do you think it is? And what kind of helped you validate it as you were moving forward with sketches and talking with your husband?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I felt like the timing of this project corresponded so well with some new information that we were getting in the public about the dangers of toxic chemicals in sunscreens,
Mhm.
in addition to the severe damage that UVA and UVB rays cause to our skin. So we always knew it wasn't good to be sunburned, but I feel like our generation is learning more now about how dangerous it actually is, and the numbers behind, the sunburns that you get in childhood double or more your risk of developing melanoma as an adult. So these numbers were starting to come out. I was starting to become aware of the dangers of the sun more. And then simultaneously, I got a phone call from Costco that was issuing a factory recall on the Neutrogena sunblock that I had just spent all summer spraying on myself and my kids. And it was being factory recalled because it contained a cancer-causing carcinogen called benzene. And I absolutely started looking into this and realized that Neutrogena was not the only brand recalling sunblocks for this carcinogen. There's actually hundreds of products that were being recalled. And this was the exact summer that I was really starting to think about this swimsuit, and the winter following when I started sketching it. So I felt like there were things happening in the media and education with the general public that was definitely making me feel like this is a big problem. It might even be bigger than I think. And if people don't know they need this product today, surely they will be, realizing that they need this product sometime in the next few years, as we think about sun safety and keeping our kids safe and healthy.
Mhm. Oh yeah, that was very timely then to have all that.
Yes.
Happening. And I don't know, like, so after you did some of the first illustrations, and it sounds like your creative background really came through, to be able to start sketching and having any sense of how to draw something with the human body. I know for that some people that could be like a detour, barrier, I guess. But after those kind of first sketches, can you talk about, who helped you and how did you get to manufacturing maybe, or well, what was the next step? Because I know you're talking a lot about sun and what kind of even textiles you even consider when you're trying to find a fabric and source fabric. So can you kind of walk us through that journey?
Yeah. So after I got those first few sketches done, and I had, like I said, I finally had a sketch that I felt like was good enough to show somebody. I kind of, going back to your last question, I did get feedback from a few close friends who were young moms and had young kids, because I just, again, wanted a little bit. I didn't share the idea widely because I was very nervous, first of all. And I also wanted to keep it close to my heart, sort of. I wanted to feel out the market and only run it by a few trusted council members, I guess, before deciding whether or not it was something I wanted to pursue. And the feedback that I received was, gosh, I'd never thought of that, but yes, I would put my kid in this if it was available. That's kind of the main thing I heard. So I felt like there was a demand, and I felt like the demand was going to be growing, but I had no idea how to scale this idea or how to take this sketch and turn it into a prototype even, of what I wanted. So I really just started doing research online. And we live in an era where you can literally figure out almost anything if you put the time in and you do research. So I learned about something called a tech pack. And to anyone who's listening that's in the garment industry, this is so basic, but you have to have a tech pack to manufacture a product or a garment. It's the very specific measurements and details that any manufacturer can use, basically instructions for how to manufacture a garment. And I had absolutely no idea about how to create this tech pack or how you possibly turn a sketch into a tech pack, let alone where you find your fabric. How do you get the prints that you like onto your fabric? Can you draw your own prints? I mean, there was just so much that I had no idea about because I studied business. I didn't study design. I didn't think it was serious enough, and it would have really come in handy during this process. But I found a partner, a company in Indonesia, and they help fashion startups basically take your idea through product development and get you to the point where you're ready for manufacturing. So that was a crucial step, was deciding to make the investment, find a partner who knew more than I did and would be able to sort of guide me through this process of creating the tech pack and really prototyping the swimsuit to create something that met the needs that I felt like we needed to meet.
Mm-hmm. So once you decided with the partner, and you're trusting them, which is another big thing, like for not probably have ever met them in person. I know that sourcing and manufacturing can be a long journey for some people, particularly when you are trying to find either a certain way that they manufacture, print, produce, ethical, but even making sure that they have the right kind of fabrics that you considered in your tech pack. But once you made that decision, like, then what happened? Like, did they just start producing? Like, how does that look? And, are you receiving shipments from Indonesia? Like, how often? Talk about that kind of receiving side.
Yeah. It was a really long process, and I absolutely did not start receiving production, like large production orders right away. No way. So it started, at the beginning, we met through Zoom. And like you said, it was really difficult. It was during COVID also. So everyone, even if they were down the street, we probably would have met through Zoom rather than face to face. But yeah, I was able to send them my sketches, send them my ideas, and then we would do design meetings over Zoom. And I would talk about the specific themes that I had in mind, or clarify at least, like, here's the sketch, but here are other details that I want. Like, I want the zipper completely wrapped on the inside of the garment so that there's no rough edge against the baby's skin. Like, little details like that, we would talk through. And then initially they would create a digital sketch from my hand sketch and send it to me through email. And I would mark it up like crazy on my MacBook and send it back to them. And then they would do another rendition of the sketch until we had a digital picture of what it looked like. And once we got that digital picture finalized with the type of themes that I wanted, all those details, again, like zipper tape to protect the top of the zipper so it wasn't rubbing up on the baby's chin. Once we had most of those details ironed out, it was time to make our very first prototype. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I was still working on sourcing fabric. So we were making a prototype, but we did not make the prototype in the fabric that I ended up using in the end. There was a lot of trial and error, probably over 30 renditions of the prototype before it was finalized. And that, to answer your question, is that every time they would make a prototype, which could take 4 weeks, let's say, they would send it to me. And I would put it on my son, who was about 14 months old. So our sample size initially was 12 to 18 months because that was the age of my youngest child. So he was such a trooper and ate so many fruit snacks during those first 9 months when I would bribe him to put the swimsuit on so I could measure him and test it out. And I quickly realized after the first few prototypes that the fabric options that I was seeing from Indonesia just were not meeting my needs. I envisioned like a really high quality swimwear fabric that most importantly was UPF 50, so provided the highest level of UVA and UVB protection, but that didn't achieve that rating through a chemical application. And I started to realize that a lot of the fabrics that have UPF ratings are treated with a chemical to get that protection. And I'm making a garment for babies who don't want to wear toxic sunscreen or use sunscreens that might have toxic chemicals. So a fabric treated in chemicals was just not an option for what I was trying to do. And so that was at the time, it was a realization that I had made. And it also felt like a really big deal. I started to wonder, will I even be able to find a fabric that meets my needs? And I knew that this was one of those times in my journey that I either needed to take the reins myself and take over fabric sourcing, which was really overwhelming and part of what I was paying this company to help me to do. But I felt like we just weren't really getting anywhere. So I could either take their subpar option, or I could just start cold calling fabric suppliers all over the world and try to track down something that met my needs. And that's what I started to do. So I would just call. And so many times in my journey, I was obviously a novice who had no experience in the garment industry or in design. And I would just ask questions. And if I talked to somebody in LA who didn't have something that would work, I would ask for recommendations of other companies that they might know who could be able to help me out. And I just sort of followed the path, one step leads to the next. And I would just keep picking up the phone and calling until I ended up finding a fabulous partner in Portland, Oregon. And they are where I get my fabric, and they have UPF fabrics that are not chemically treated. So our fabric achieves its sun protective factor through the density of the weave rather than a chemical application. And they just really produce very high quality swim fabric. And so they also do all of my custom prints. So they dye the fabric for me, and we work through that process together. There's a lot that goes into the prints as well. You're working with Pantone colors, and you're trying to coordinate different prints so that the blues match, and if they're all the right hue, not too cool, not too warm. And they worked through all of that with me as well.
Wow. That's a process. I mean, because your story already started with, oh, there was chemicals in sunscreen, and now what am I going to do? And now to have to go through the whole fabric and not choose like the subpar option in Indonesia. I think that speaks to a lot of even just how your product is different from so many others. And can you talk about now, I guess, like how can you find it today? So what's your strategy as it relates to like how you're distributing, how you're selling? Is it online? Did you choose to go through a wholesale model? How can people find you?
Yeah. So I am selling my line on our website, direct to consumer, and that's lakelabel.com. But here being in Des Moines, Iowa, I knew that for this company to be a success and for the first collection to take off, I needed to get it into other markets. And with my company just being me, I'm doing all the design, I'm doing all the marketing, all the sales, just me over here. I needed to wholesale it to retail partners all over the country to basically get that geographic diversification, because I couldn't do pop-ups all over the country even if I traveled every weekend and drug my family with me. I wouldn't be able to spread it as far as I felt like it needed to be spread, because there are families on both coasts and all over the country that spend time outside together, and that I felt like this product would really benefit and make their time together easier. So I decided to have my direct-to-consumer outlet on my website, and then also wholesale the product to shops and resorts across the country.
Cool. So today, you're a little over a year into the journey. What ultimately does success look like for you as a founder, but even just with your company, kind of pulling apart both your personal and professional success, but also what is Lake Label? What do you aspire it to be?
Yeah, that is something I've honestly been still trying to figure out. And I feel like it's so fluid, because if you would have asked me this 6 months ago, I would have said, my goal is to just wholesale 10% of my inventory, and that would be success. And I surpassed that goal in a matter of weeks, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. So now I'm really trying to figure out, what does that look like? And I think the bottom line is that if I'm getting my product into the hands of mothers or caregivers or fathers or grandparents, anyone who's trying to spend time with a little one that they love outside, and they get my product and it makes it even a little bit easier for them to get to the beach or to get to the pool and spend quality time with these kids, then I think it's a success. Obviously, I would love to see the company grow. I need it to make money so that we can keep doing this. But at the end of the day, I just want to basically facilitate families to be able to spend more time together outside and not have to worry about toxic chemicals and sunscreens or the sun damage for their kiddos.
That's awesome. So kind of getting into fun questions here too. I guess kind of off the top of your head, what is one thing you wish you knew as you first started Lake Label? And maybe just for fun, like what's one thing you wish you knew just from last week on the spot?
Yeah. Okay. So just from last week, I watched my second grader go through a really challenging situation at school with some friends, just some second grade troubles. And I found myself being so gentle with him last week and telling him how, this challenge can feel like such a big deal in the moment, but that if we looked at it from what he can learn or how it's going to strengthen him, it really is a small thing that we can actually be grateful for because he's going to come out stronger at the end of this. Mm-hmm. And I was really thinking about how I sort of talked to myself and how I treated myself at the beginning of this Lake Label journey. And I wish I would have been as gentle as I was with my 8-year-old, with myself. So when small things happened during the product development phase, they were just little bumps in the road. But to me, it felt almost apocalyptic. Like, how will I ever come back from this? Or the whole project is derailed now. The chemically treated fabric example is a great example. I just really was like, I don't even know if I'll be able to figure this out. And I wish I would have been a little gentler with myself and told myself at the end of this, you will have learned that you can source fabric by yourself and you don't need a partner. But I was not I didn't say those things inside my head. So I just wish that I would have known, to encourage myself the way that I encourage my own kids or the way that I would encourage a friend or even a mentor that I respect and look up to.
Mm-hmm. And kind of on the note of mentors, have you had mentors in your life? It sounds like you have some family mentors, but can you kind of talk about how you found mentorship maybe early on this journey or any tips for people looking for mentors?
Yeah. So this journey is really unique because it happened during COVID. Yep. So I didn't feel like I had a ton of mentors who had been in this space that could guide me. And I now know that a lot of swimwear startups, they'll hire a consultant who can kind of fill that role and show them here's how fabric sourcing typically works, or here's what you're looking for in a manufacturer. And I didn't even know enough to hire somebody to do that for me. I just didn't even really know that was an option. But I will say, I guess there were some non-traditional mentors who came alongside of me through this process. And the people who come to mind are even the local company who does my printing. The owner of that company provided me with encouragement in moments where I was questioning my marketing or questioning my brand image. And he doesn't really even realize it, but ended up being a huge part of my journey and encourager down that line. There's another shop owner that comes to mind who is carrying my line this year. And I spoke with her before I placed my large production order this winter. And I was going to order about 80% less than what I ended up ordering. And she just mentioned to me how important it was to believe in my brand and to believe in my product. And I ended up ordering 5 times as many swimsuits after that conversation. And if I wouldn't have taken her advice, I would have been sold out by January. And swimsuit season doesn't even start until May. So it was, these aren't formal mentors, but these are people who really, whether they know it or not, came alongside of me and provided so much encouragement and guidance along the way that was just so helpful.
That's awesome. So how are you doing this season now that it is May? How have things picked up and what does your week to week look like?
Yes, things are picking up. It's so fun. There's nothing like seeing orders come in the morning, especially from people that I don't know. So even today I got an order from Orlando and I'm always racking my brain. do I know this person? Is this my mom's friend who's just ordering a swimsuit? But these are really people I don't know, which is so exciting that, and just shows me that my swimsuits are getting out into the world, and maybe somebody saw it on a beach and asked, where they got it, and they found my site. But it's just so rewarding to see sales come in, and to hear feedback. I've been getting a lot of instant or direct messages through Instagram from parents who somehow or another found my swimsuit and send me pictures and just let me know how much easier it makes their time at the beach or at the pool. And those just, light me up and keep me encouraged to keep going.
Nice. Yeah. I had about 10 friends during COVID have babies. So I am definitely going to send them to your website as they're going to the beach. I also grew up in a lake town, so I'm excited to share even just your product to them.
Yeah.
So it should be, I wish you the best for the summer season. And I know last week we actually just had all the universities, college students graduated, had their semester end. And so I always like to ask the question, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out and maybe they just graduated college? So they're a little older than 16, 17 before they were choosing what they wanted to study at college. But what should they know? What should they know as they enter, the real world? And maybe what would you even offer that they should ignore, even if they were to say start a business? So yeah, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self even?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I would tell a recent college graduate is don't ever think that a certain company or a certain group of people or even an idea are too big for you. Mm-hmm. I would just tell them to go big. And I just think back to myself at that age, they would be, or you are, so much more capable than what you even believe. And the only thing keeping them from doing the infinite is not doing it. Mm-hmm. So I would just tell them to go big and try it, because they can do so much more than they even believe. And all they have to do is start.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great piece to share. And I even think too, for the community within Des Moines, and you don't have to be a young, listener, a young audience listener, but anyone, I think that's pretty solid advice, is to just think big or think bigger. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that, even though there's always the small details to getting there, but you first got to
right.
So that makes a lot of sense. And even, I guess, kind of talking about the community, you've mentioned a little bit of some of these, like the shop owner that helped you to think bigger, order a bigger amount, a product. But what are some things that you really love about the Des Moines or even the Iowa small business startup community?
I have been so blown away by the support that I've received from other local businesses and shops who just genuinely want to support somebody in their own community. That has been so cool for me. Even a few like mom influencers who have young kids that I've reached out to say like, hey, can I send you a suit? Try it out, let me know what you think. I mean, people are just so excited and genuinely excited to support other business owners in our own community that it's been just really humbling and really has blown me away.
Is there anything that's on your wish list that you wish to see?
The caveat here is that I'm relatively new to the entrepreneur community here in Des Moines, and I started my business during COVID. So there's probably a lot that I haven't even had exposure to yet, but I do feel like that face-to-face, in-person community that you can build with other entrepreneurs or even just other people at your stage of life is something that I would love to do more of. And I think that also as it warms up here, people are outside more, they're going to the farmer's market. You're just naturally building community a little bit more easily with other people. But in this digital age where we are just so connected online, yet it can be so artificial, I just feel like as a business owner and a new business owner, I'm really yearning for those face-to-face encounters and opportunities to really connect with people like that.
So, kind of wrapping up, where can people find you? I know you've mentioned your website, but where can people, like, if I'm a modern mom with some children, or even a father or someone that wants to gift this, where can they find you, and maybe even what shops locally could they shop at?
Yeah, so we are on social at Lake Label Swim. So pretty simple, Instagram and Facebook. And our website is where you can always purchase swimwear, and it's just www.lakelabel.com. And locally, I would love it if you want to see the suits in person or stop by and shop. You can find our line in the East Village at Jane's Family Shop on Locust. And then our other Iowa shop is in Lake Okoboji, and that's Boathouse Apparel. So if you're at the lake, stop in and check out our line there, or in the East Village. And then we have retail partners all around the country, both coasts, California, Florida, Texas, Hawaii. And you can see all of our partners on our website, and specifically you can check out where to shop there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Megan.
Yeah.
And any last final thoughts as we depart, as we get ready for summer and a beautiful day?
Yes. Stay safe in the sun, but don't be afraid to get out there and enjoy the beautiful weather while we have it. So I just hope that this swimwear line really does allow families to get outside together and enjoy more quality time together. And Diana, thank you so much for the invitation and spending the time with me. I just really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Megan. Thank you for being here. And thank you for starting business too. I mean, I give a lot of credit to people who are taking the risk. And I honestly think that entrepreneurs are the most fun to be around, both creatively and just ways that you're open to solving problems. So kudos to everything that you're doing.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Small Business and Startup Stories DSM. Inspired by these stories, we offer a hub full of resources needed for any small business owner to grow and succeed in Greater Des Moines, Iowa at dsmpartnership.com/small business. Thank you for listening.